What's up, everyone? We're finally back out in the field today to start doing some repair work on our soybeans that were damaged from all the excess rainfalls we've had over the last 3 to 4 weeks since they were planting. We don't have very many locations where there's an entire loss of a crop in an area. However, we do have a lot of stands that are very thin. When you compare this area of the field to the adjacent areas of the field, it's very easy to tell that this is a little bit thin when we want to have a stand that looks more like these nice, lush green areas of the field. One of the primary reasons that we do not have a full stand of soybeans right in this region is that the water pattern comes right through here. These soybeans were underwater for a lot longer than they prefer. Although we did not lose all of them, we lost enough plants out here to justify bringing out the planter and come and spot in maybe not a full rate of soybeans, but a partial rate at least. The whole south end of this farm is where the majority of the water off of this entire 200 acres comes to. Ground conditions are just now dry enough to be able to get out and about to bring a planter out here and replant. As you can see, really no question that we need to add more soybeans to the area. Very thin. This area of the field may very well be able to still put out a decent soybean crop. If we don't replant it and there's not an adequate stand come June, July, what will happen is this specific area will really struggle in terms of weed control. In a soybean field, one of the primary methods of controlling weeds is through population of soybeans. They act as a competitor plant and shade out the ground to work against those very, very vigorous broadleaf weeds we have out in these fields, such as water-hip, giant ragweed, and mare's tail, are our primary issues. We would also like to have too many soybeans as opposed to too little. If the quantity of plants out in this area of the field is too low, we're going to be limiting our top-end yield potential, whereas if we come back in here and put too many in, you're really not limiting your top-end potential. You are putting a little bit of wasteful amount of seed. At the end of the day, though, you would rather have too many soybean plants than not enough. We're going to have a lot of areas out in our farm that require just a quick in and out replanting procedure. No tillage required. We're only going to need a planter. Come in no-till. We're going to follow up there. And then there's also some draws out in the field you can't necessarily tell from this video, such as right up there where all the water flows. We just had emergence issues. Nothing really against the soybean variety itself. They just had some very harsh conditions early on. This is not really a major event for us. We usually have to replant both corn and soybeans every year. Last year was extremely challenging in terms of replanting and planting in general with how wet of a spring we had. This year we're going to be replanting 1 to 2 acre patches at a time. Last year we were replanting 70, 80, 90 acre patches at a time. That's how much nicer this season's been so far. It's not even June yet, and as they say, you gotta plant your soybeans early. That way when you replant them, they'll be on time. So that's why we were out here in April planting this field, and we have a fantastic stand of soybeans for 99% of the field, but these few spots do justify coming out here and adding some more seeds. So we're gonna do a little bit more scouting and go from there. I scouted a handful of fields, took a short lunch break, and I'm back out in another field as we speak, and I've learned a few things. One, we do not have very large areas of fields that need replanted. However, we do have a good quantity of spots that are just thin. Those are the worst spots to replant, and I'm definitely going to have a game plan drawn up before I come out here with the planter. What looks like a small patch from the road is a lot different when you're up 8 or 9 feet in the air looking down the soybeans. I like to have a game plan set in stone. That way when I'm out in the field, I know what I need to replant. I can get it done. I cannot do too much and I cannot do too little. That's going to be my first thing. You can see another good field of soybeans. And as I was at my lunch break, it started raining again. That's just summer in Coles County for you. So rainstorms when you least expect it. It's probably going to put us out of the field at least until tomorrow with this replant, but I'm going to go ahead and pick up some soybeans and we're going to go from there. The remainder of that rain went to the northwest. It was enough to at least put a little bit of moisture in the terrace bottoms, which is exactly what I'd want to come out here and spot into. Usually a terrace bottom like this, which is solely designed to hold and funnel water to that inlet over there, is going to have a thin stand when you have a season with a lot of rain. This is going to take a few days to dry off at this point. You can see this was getting close to dry, though it was a little bit wetter than our home farm as we got that massive rainfall that had the hail damage out here on this farm and our other farm directly to the northwest on Sunday that I showed you in the last video. which I do plan on giving you guys a little more comprehensive of an update on that hail damage and how it affects our crop and how we consider it for replant and insurance purposes. Wish it would stop raining. There's more rain coming in the distance if you can't tell. My lens is getting wet. It's sticking in my boots. There's no way I'd ever get out here and get this replanted at this point. That's unfortunate. Surprisingly though, the terrace is not in that bad a shape. The terrace directly adjacent to it has a pretty good stand. For the most part, this field looks phenomenal. I imagine there's some wet spots more to the north of this field that may need replanting. We're gonna go ahead and still pick up those beans, put them in the truck, get ready to put them in the planter, and I imagine tomorrow we'll be able to drop in at least at home and plant some beans. You still see plants. Oh, that one never emerged. That plant was growing in the ground. That's crazy. Very visible signs of the hail damage we had on Sunday. Not very many of these plants though are chopped off, which is a good sign. This leaf tissue really got a beating. One of the easiest ways to diagnose hail damage in your field is punch holes in the leaves. Strong winds can cause leaf damage, but it's more of a tear as opposed to hail damage, which is a punch hole, sometimes trapdooring, other similar things. I mean, you can tell where the hail clearly went through this leaf and put a hole in it. Later on in the season, it's more difficult to tell, as you will get some insect feeding that can mimic hail damage, but right now, that's a pretty severe hail we had on this farm and our other farm, especially given the stage of these soybeans. The rain is picking up if you can't tell. I'm gonna go grab a box of soybeans and check a few more fields. I don't believe I'll be able to replant anything today, but I may be able to go ahead and load the soybean planter once the rain subsides. Well, the rain never let up, so I'm not gonna load this Pro Box in the back of the truck and let those beans get all wet. Probably just gonna have to sit out for a couple days and hope it dries up a little bit. That way we can finish putting on some nitrogen and replanting. See you guys later. Happy Thursday, everyone. I'm gonna top off the truck real quick, hook up the seed tender. As opposed to yesterday, my plan was just to pick up the Pro Box of beans, bring them down to the farm and load them in. I decided it really was not worth my time to add an extra step to the equation. Whereas if I just take the seed tender up to the Pioneer dealers, they'll load it straight into the tender and I don't have to mess with it. So that's what we're gonna do this morning. We've got a little bit more rain, probably overnight into mid-morning. We're gonna let the sun come out here in the next probably hour or so, dry the top of the ground off, and then we're gonna go ahead and replant some beans. Back in there. The battery was dead on the seed tender, of course, so we're gonna let it charge for 15 or 20 minutes, run and do something else, and come back and hopefully it's ready to go. Like I've said many times, the seed tender is not functional without a battery. Even if the engine can run, it needs a battery to operate the hydraulics, the scale, all that jazz. So we gotta wait for it to charge, and then we'll go get that seed in a little bit. Battery's charged. I'm gonna take it off the quick way. It's been sitting here in the barn untarped for a while. I'm gonna open up both of the doors. If there's any bird residue in there. Sometimes the birds like to leave some junk in there. We're gonna go get some beans. My destination is in sight over there. There's about 50 units of 31 A22 Pioneer soybeans waiting on me to be put in the seed tender, then to be put in the planter so we can start replanting. I stand corrected. 45 units of 31 A22s, and they're treated. Not even June 1st, these babies may have a yield potential of 70 bushel. If we can get 70 bushel an acre out of replant beans, that'd be phenomenal. Still extremely optimistic for the year. Up north, where our Pioneer dealer is located, seems to be a little too wet to get anything done. They had a little bit more rain than we did. However, down south appears to be wet on top, and underneath it's dry. I'm gonna load the planter up and we're gonna get these beans in the ground. Ready and waiting for some soybeans. Get ready, first try. Bam. Probably perfect right there. All right, we're gonna load this up. The last thing in here were those Don Mario and List beans. We're headed back to an extend bean to replant. We did clean out the planter though, so we don't have to worry about any kind of cross-contamination and our beans dying. Obviously, if there's a few left in there, that's not going to be an issue at all. So we're going to go ahead and load these 3-1 beans in the planter. We had 2,200 pounds total, so we're aiming for about 1,100 per side. See, it loads it pretty darn quick. We got the planter loaded. Chris and I took my truck over, unhooked the seed tender because there's no reason to need that. But we have one other thing we need to do that's been bugging me, and it's to clean the back window of this tractor. Still the remnants of that hydraulic leak covered that back window with oil, and it likes to get dirt stuck to it now. So I'm going to spray it off and clean it up a little bit. That way I can actually see out the back when I'm replanting. I know that no one wants to watch this, and I saw this trick the other day on Millennial Farmer's channel. I'm going to try it out. Much better. Look at that streak-free shine. Yeah, it does. It looks great. All it takes is some John Deere Classic Glass Cleaner and 2 microfiber towels. One for a wet wipe, one for a dry wipe. And you can't even tell that was covered in hydraulic oil. Let's go replant some beans. I didn't clean this window though, because it's kind of a pain in the butt to get to. Need a ladder. Back in the saddle. Wow, this wide angle lens makes it look like I'm flying down this road. I'm only doing a casual 26 miles an hour. You can do a good stand count from up in the tractor. I'll be back over here in a little bit after I finish this farm to the southwest. Both these farms are going to have a little bit that needs spotted in. We're at our first location to replant. It's very evident that it's thin along here in the corner, especially when compared to those nice lush green areas out there. We're gonna go ahead and unfold, get ready to rock and roll. There she goes. Wing wheels down, there goes Marty. Hitch down, unlock the wings. Perfect. Hitch down, planter down. Back's on. Left back, right back. They're running. Fans running. We had this planter completely cleaned out before we came to this field. So there's no reason to be in too much of a hurry. I want to make sure everything's got seed before I start. Do that. We're going to prime the row units here. One of the most important things about priming the row units isn't just that you need seed coming out in every plate, but if you notice, if I can zoom in here a little bit, right where there's the gap in the frame there on the inside section, there are 2 hooks that hit each other. Once you've unfolded, those hooks aren't automatically together, and it can take 10 to 15 feet of planting before they actually come in contact to start driving those outside row units. I want to make sure that they're running before I get too far ahead of myself. That way I don't leave a gap for the first 10 to 15 feet, as I said. If I make sure they're primed and soybeans are coming out every unit, it'll be planting right out of the gate. Another really important thing to do when we're replanting is to make sure that we select the farm that we're about to replant on. We have to keep pretty specific track of how many acres we replant for crop insurance purposes. We do receive some minor compensation for having to replant our crops. It's not ideal to have to be out there doing this a second time. We are losing yield potential by having to come back and replant. That's part of crop insurance and covering us. Also, something important to do, if I go into my maps here, it's extremely important to come in and change to replanting as opposed to planting, because if you notice, I already have coverage in this field. So my swath control, or my row shutoffs, whatever you want to call them, will not work out here unless I either clear the coverage or switch to replanting under my documentation tab. Actually, no, under my resources tab, I'm sorry. It takes me a while to get through, so I switched this to replanting from planting. Now I'm on planning. I'm gonna have a brand new line here. I have a brand new screen here, fresh data, and my totals page down here on the bottom is gonna be empty, which is important because I need to keep track, as I said, of every individual field, because we do get paid on a per acre basis for replanting. Now that is not ever beneficial. I don't want you to think that we're out here trying to make money replanting. We're out here trying to put a crop in the ground. We do have insurance incentives to make sure that we have a crop even if conditions are not optimal. That's just one of those parts of farming. You can tell there's nothing certain out in this field. Obviously gonna have to do a lot of replanting here in the outside corner. There's another low spot farther out there, probably 100 yards, and then probably this entire in row that we had so much water standing. As I mentioned earlier, I like to have a plan before I go out in the field and replant. Well, to be blunt, my plan for this field is I'm gonna plant that way, and I'm gonna plant this way, I'm gonna do some of this, probably do some of that, and then fold up and do some kind of similar rendition in another field. It's that simple, guys. Just take notes. Also, I should mention, if it's thin, I'm only gonna put out 100,000 soybeans per acre. If there's no beans at all, I'm gonna put out another 165,000, which is what we start with originally. I don't want too many beans if I can avoid it, but it's not a big deal. I just don't want to be wasteful. See, some of these spots I'll probably just set at 165,000 and plant. That way I don't have to worry about it. Dad's coming to check in on me as we speak, so I'm gonna see what he has to say. Dad and I just drove all the way to the west into the field. There's a lot of pockets out here that have got a pretty good amount of water damage. I'm most likely gonna keep the planter set on 165,000. Just jog around, plant what I can, drive over on the far side. There's a lot less. There's a little bit more of a roll to the ground, so the water got off and ended up over here. But let's get at her. A little sticky out here still. Very helpful to run the markers even if you're using auto steer when you're out replanting, because it can be very tough to see where you've been and where you haven't been. Real masterpiece I'm putting together out here. This is one time I'm very thankful to have row shutoffs. They make this job a lot easier. I'm also extremely thankful to be planting the one crop where it does not matter what direction you plant, because we can harvest it at any direction. Corn, I'd have to straddle the rows every time. Soybeans, heck, I'm weaving in and out. There's really no method to my madness out here. It's almost an art form. Kind of stinks, and this is why I talk about having a game plan, is it all looks the same once you're out here. You can tell where I've replanted some, what I didn't think needed replanted. Almost exhausting work, just the amount of mental calculations you're doing all the time to visualize and then make that decision whether or not it's going to need seed in the ground or not. There's even spots where I planted some on the outside and left a little island on the middle just because I didn't think it justified replanting. As of right now, we're not quite done. We have 10.4 acres worked. This is an 80-acre field, by far our worst field in terms of water damage. We had a lot sitting down here. We have a cornfield that we're going to check on in the future when it's dry enough that we probably lost 30 acres out in. One of our more troublesome fields with water. I'd say by the time we're all said and done, we're going to be close to 13 or 14 acres. Majority of the large ponds have been replanted so far. You see I put in a pretty big area through there, just like sewing something together. And the planter is beeping as always. Says it's not planting, but I know it is in fact planting. Let's hop into the planter real quick and get a little bit more of a first-person view at what's going on as we're going through these soybeans and putting in new seeds. got a pretty severe storm on the horizon right now. 32 bar running across the field, putting some nitrogen on, and the Exact-Emerge planter showing up into that same field to go ahead and try and replant ahead of what could be another 1-inch rain. So we're really cutting it close on time here. I'm still stitching in some beans out in this field, hoping to get it done soon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is not looking too promising over to the southwest. Very blue. Much like my attitude watching a storm like that roll in. Dad's over there trying to get that replanted. He can cover ground very quickly, but he is replanting, which is a little bit slower process. Nitrogen bar is just a little bit ahead of him, trying to get the nitrogen on for the corn that is standing. Keep you guys updated. Hopefully we can get this finished. Gonna do a little weather check. We are the blue dot right here. That is not looking good. Put her in motion. Slowly but surely. They're doing their best over there to speed things up. I've got about all this replanted. I ended up with a lot more acres than I was planning on, 22. That's exactly what I meant when you need to have a game plan before you come out in the field. I got out here even with the game plan. I started looking across the field to see the variations of stands we had and made a decision just to go ahead and plant more than I had originally intended on. And as you can see, I ended up putting a lot of acres in. Shouldn't be an issue. A lot of the ones I plant over that are already standing don't actually die, except for maybe where the tractor runs. They're very resilient little plants, especially at this stage in their life. They'll probably stand back up and continue growing with little to no impact on yield. Hopefully these other ones can catch up. So we're gonna finish up a few spots ahead of us in this field, maybe zip over another field before it rains. I'm not sure, but we're gonna keep the hammer down today. Just wrote down my official acreage on the farm, on my window, of course, one of the best places to keep track of something. Buds is 23.12 acres. This is an 80-acre farm, so it has about 20 acres that struggle with water. And keep in mind that this is our worst, if not one of our top 2 worst farms in terms of drainage. We've got the farm across the road and then our farm over by Etna. Unfortunately though, if that rain comes down extremely hard, we'll be out here replanting again. Developing to a pretty strong storm. I guess developing, it's already developed. It's, oh man, headed our way as we speak. Hopefully no more hail. Planter's folded up. Dad needs some talc. I'm gonna run over to him. He's over here planting next to the nitrogen bar, so we'll see how that's going. I do not envy him by any means. Looks like a real tough job. He's got to raise the planter, lower the planter, make sure he's running on his auto steer line all the time. Jogging around. Dance around with the nitrogen bar over there in the corner, trying to put on nitrogen on this farm that has had none on it at all. But I'm going to go down to the northeast here and try to replant some more ahead of the storm. I don't know if he's going to need seed or what. He's coming to tell me. Well folks, this is not quite a high-speed planter, but it's going to be as high of a speed as this tractor can pull it, because there's a nice little storm rolling across. Hopefully it's more growl than bite. You never know what you're going to get. Wind is out of the south, maybe south-southwest. If it keeps it to the west there, that'd be perfect. But I'm going to unfold this real quick and we're going to plant, like I said, as fast as this planter will go. That's as close to being rained out as you possibly can be. Dad's still back at that other field planting corn, and it's dust is flying, but I can see at that house, which is on the west side of that property, there is rain falling. The nitrogen bar is also running. Pretty impressive. We're going to shoot through here real quick, finish putting these beans in the ground, hop over another field. Hopefully we can get a lot done, but it's looking bad. Well, bad news. Looks like the wind has shifted to the northeast. That may bring that over towards us. See, it's raining right over there. I will say, there is one silver lining, is these beans out here look phenomenal. I'm gonna have to look and see what these are. I think they're a Pioneer 3-6 bean, but wow, incredible stand. Can't see very well because it's so dark. Door zipping. I'm going 8 miles an hour and I'm putting on 150,000 according to my sensors. Realistically, I'm probably putting more than that down because as you go faster, you start to put doubles in the seed unit and they can't count them as well. I upped my target population because I knew I was going to be going a little faster. I like to be going faster than that. But that's what we're going to do and try to get as many as we can in. Plant through another pond that won't come up. It's part of it. You guys watched me plant through this already one time. It's a little bit more moist now. Okay. Well, that worked well. Alright, rain's coming down pretty good now. We can probably plant until either it starts rolling up on the tires or the gauge wheels start plugging up. And we are going to take advantage of that. I don't think I can't really see that well. Just because tractor windshield wipers suck. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to get out of here. Pretty heavy rain coming down. I can barely see what to replant when I'm out there, let alone with crap all over my window. I think I'm in a bean field. Alright, I gotta fix that somehow. Starting to stick onto the tires a little bit. I'm headed towards the road. Unfortunately, I got rained out. But don't worry, I am planting my way out of the field. No reason to quit planting. 13th gear. Like I said, this is a high-speed planter if you need it to be. And that looks kind of rough. I literally cannot see anything. Well, folks, this one's definitely chocked. It's starting to get soft out here. I'm going to plant my way to the outside and call it a day, probably. Unfortunately, I was hoping to get this all done. We're at least going to get some beans in some of the worst areas. As for the rest, we'll have to come back another day. Every time we go to do something, it starts to rain. Regardless, though, we're at the will of Mother Nature. Also, who invented these windshield wipers? They suck. You think that they could have come up with something better than this? They do nothing. Nothing at all. Kind of frustrating, actually. Yeah, that looks kind of wet there. If it's going to keep raining, I gotta call it quits. I got a little bit done. Let's point out this wet spot. I'd say the boss got rained out too. Here he comes down the road. A little bit muddy. Isn't it crazy how fast it looks like that's going, but it's really not going fast at all. Yeah, I probably should have stopped sooner than I did. We were successful in replanting 23, about 3, and about 5. So about 30 plus acres of soybeans today. Majority of it was in one field. Some of these were just emergence issues, but considering that that is a 200 acre field I was just replanting in right here where I got all this mud, that's not very many replant. We still probably have another couple acres to do there. We'll get to it when it dries up. Unfortunately though, in June, or late May, June, early summer, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't take long for the ground to dry at 80 to 90 degrees. And the tile really does wonders here, so we'll be back out here before we know it. Unfortunately, we didn't get it all done, but we got some done. There goes the nitrogen rig. He's going home too. Is there a little bit of mud on my tires? Hey, little John Deere train going here. Power washing guy's not gonna like that. Better slow down before I rear end this guy. I know it's probably hard to guess, but we did in fact get rained out replanting corn and soybeans. Dad got in a little sooner than I stayed out probably longer than I should have, and my planter got a little bit muddy. I could barely even see what was going on, so it was hard to tell how wet the field had gotten. And unfortunately it gotten a little bit more wet than I'd intended on. Dad just informed me that he's having some planter issues with row 18, he replanted like a quarter of that field with that row not planting at all. So we've got a 60-inch row somewhere. But people plant corn that wide in some parts of the world. I've already pulled the hose off. He's gonna lower the planter for me. We're gonna peek in there and see if there's any kind of obstructions. I told him not to lower it enough the fan turns on, because if the fan starts running, that's just gonna be violently shooting corn out. So we'll see in there and see if we see anything. He has to wait for his computer to boot up before he can lower the planter. Mine is all mechanical. Look how muddy the planter is. That's insane. It's hard to get the camera up that far, but there's a blockage in there. I think if I can reach my fingers in there, maybe I'll get it. Yeah. After dumping the planter and only spilling a little bit of corn, we determined that it was a chunk of seed treatment, courtesy of our friends at Pioneer Hybrids. The rain's passed and the sun's come back out for the last hour or so. Dad and I have scouted a few of the fields that we were in replanting and that we've been putting nitrogen on. It doesn't look like we're going to be able to continue with any field work today. It's not looking promising tomorrow with another rain in the forecast tonight. They're not calling for very much. If we miss that rain, we'll definitely be out in the field again tomorrow doing some replanting. This nitrogen bar that you can see in the background way over there, that's not our tractor or our bar. That's a custom bar that's been running for us. Been very convenient to have that going while we can replant and not have to unhook our tractors. Anyways, we should be able to take the planters back out. Dad lacked about a third of that field to replant. He already replanted 25 acres out there in a 70-acre field, so that's a pretty large amount of the field that drowned out. It'd be nice to have that replanted. We can move on to think about other things. I need to finish up the field that we were replanting with this when that rain started to come down. I would say I'm a third to a halfway done doing that. Just depends on when I get out there and decide what I think needs replanted and what doesn't. This is a good moment for me, though, to stop and talk about why I'm planting 3-1 beans into all of our bean fields as opposed to matching the varieties with the variety that was originally planted out there. I've jumped around from a 4-0 bean to a 3-6 to a 3-8 in different fields that I was replanting in, but I always am putting the 3-1 in. In some cases, you would want to put a longer season bean in, especially as you get later into the year, because you want that bean to maximize its growing period more than what a shorter season bean would do. So when farmers are double cropping beans behind a wheat field, where they'll go in mid-July and plant into wheat stubble with beans, they're going to plant a longer season or a longer variety of bean. That way it makes the most out of the days it has and pushes further into that cold season to be able to have more vegetative growth and hopefully more yield. What we're aiming for is harvestability. When we're out there planting in a soybean field that we've already planted the first time, we would like to be able to harvest our replant beans while we're out there, as opposed to waiting until a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later for these other soybeans to mature. Hopefully, although we're about a month behind, these 3-1 beans will mature similar to the longer season beans we have out there, 4-0s, 3-8s, 3-6s, 3-4s, as I mentioned, and we'll be able to cut them all in one pass. Wet beans are not an issue, but green beans when you're harvesting are an issue, and they may stop us. We may have to leave them and come back later. Where we will be probably delayed is in our other fields that we planted this 3-1 bean in. When we replant a 3-1 bean, they're not going to mature the same. Even soybeans that are the same variety mature differently based on planting date. A couple weeks different in planting date can result in a week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks, just depending on conditions in different harvestabilities. We will probably have to postpone harvest when we go over west to a field we have a lot drowned out. We'll have to wait a little bit for these 3-1s to mature alongside the 3-1s we have planted there. Unfortunate that we'll have to make 2 trips on some of those farms, but that's just the way it turns out. If we came into some of these fields and replanted, say, a 4-0 bean into a field that's already a 4-0 bean, this 4-0 bean would be planted almost 6 to 7 weeks later than the original plant date of the field. They would be tremendously behind, even if they emerged immediately and got up and growing. We would prefer not to have to wait a month to harvest beans, especially later. It gets later in the year. Beans are very finicky when it comes to harvesting conditions, and so we'd like to have them harvested and blended in immediately. And so that's why we're going to stick with this 3-1 bean on the rest of our farms. I hope that kind of explains why exactly we're using this specific variety of soybeans across our replant acres. Every farm is going to be different. I'm sure there are people who would rather have a longer season bean and wait for it to mature, harvest it later, and possibly have a bigger yield. Shorter season beans do not lack yield. Variety data always shows that. We just like to have different varieties out on different farms. That way they're not all ready at once. With replant corn, we have a very similar mindset. Dad was planting 108-day corn, which is actually still on our normal planting roster. However, he was planting it into a 114-day corn field. That 108-day corn should mature a little bit slower than the 114-day corn that's already out there. What it will make up for is that it takes less time and less cumulative growing degree units to reach maturity. So if the corn out in the field that we planted the first time, 114-day, let's say, is 14% when we harvest it, hopefully that 108-day is 17 or 18% moisture, a little bit behind. But when we blend that out together, it should be right where we need it for harvestability, for moisture, for storage if we put it in a grain bin. Those are just a few of the thoughts we have to consider when we replant. Oh, man. I'd say I left the field about 5 minutes too late. I think one of you experts out there that really knows how to work over a tractor and clean it well needs to come over to our farm in Mattoon, Illinois in about a month. Show me how it's done. I think this is going to need quite the cleaning to get all this mud off. But I got a few extra acres replanted because of it. Hopefully they come up. Always optimistic. Look at this nitrogen rig though. Whew, that's a beauty. Think they'd notice if I took it for a joyride? Man, Deere makes a nice rig, that's for sure. Oh, it's got depth. That stinks. Headache and a half right there. Look at that. What they got? IVT transmission in there. I don't know, guys. I think we need to hop in there real quick and see what this thing's about. Is it stealing if you have a key that works for every single tractor of this make and model? I don't know. I would consider that a gray area. 10-inch display. Whoo-wee. That's nice. It's 23 knife, so 60 foot. He's been running on all of our corn acres, courtesy of Helena and Mattoon as a crop production plant. Got a Coulter running, knife right behind it, and then that's where the 32% UAN liquid nitrogen solution comes out in between the rows. Very low disturbance and very easy to run compared to a traditional anhydrous-based side dress bar. A little bit more expensive per unit of N. We'll talk about it more in another video. Focus more on replanting here. That is nice. Little visual indicator. Surely that doesn't hold 1,900 gallons. Maybe it does. Wash tank. Rear hookup for the fill. I don't know. I was really hoping to be running one of these nitrogen bars. Probably not that exact rig, but unhook one of our planters and go ahead and hook onto one of their extra bars that are available for personal use. Didn't quite unfold that way. Since Dad and I were focused on replanting corn and soybeans, we opted just to pay them for custom work. They're also providing the chemical, or nitrogen, not necessarily chemical. Everything's a chemical, but nitrogen. They're providing the nitrogen service. Doing a good job, and actually it's very unstressful to have them work on all of our acres with nitrogen. We had a few farms that don't even have any nitrogen on just because the fall was so wet that we couldn't get an anhydrous bar across them. So we were trying to get them across that. But like I said, we'll talk about it more in the future. I could talk for years about nitrogen and nitrogen programs. Our corn's looking good out here. Not great. Give it a week. By the time this nitrogen washes down with a little bit more rain and the corn gets a little bit past this ugly yellow stage, and it's going to look phenomenal. Other than where the water has severely washed across this farm, we need to figure out something to do to alleviate this washing through here. I don't know if we need to put in more terraces. No, there are no terraces on this farm, and there's a decent roll to it. It doesn't take very much momentum for water to start a wash, and I can guarantee you that in the fall that is going to be the roughest spot on the farm. When I'm going 15 miles an hour with an auger wagon full of corn trying to get dumped because I've got 2 combines that are picking 300 bushel corn, it's going to be a challenge, but I like a challenge. We're off to a good start out here in South Central Illinois. that's going to be it for today, folks. I'm hopeful that we're going to miss this next rain shower. We'll be back in the fields tomorrow. A lot of groundwork to be done, replanting, nitrogen, what have you. Even start spraying some dicamba here in a short window if we can get it. As always, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your support. Like the video if you haven't, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment if you have any questions. Have a great night. Peace!